Do you know the origin of this song? The origin of the lyrics is surprisingly related to Aristotle from 2,500 years ago. Aristotle founded a school called Lyceum in the Temple of Apollo in Athens. Here he taught metaphysics, physics, biology, rhetoric, politics, ethics, and logic. It is amazing that one person can teach so many fields of study. At the end of the semester, they would have taken tests. The logic test was especially tricky. Let's try solving a logic problem from back then. Question: determine whether the following argument is valid or invalid. 1. All logical people are philosophers, and all philosophers are rational. So, some rational people are logical. 2. Some philosophers are not logical, and some philosophers are rational. So, some rational people are not logical. Are these arguments valid, or are they invalid? It's not easy as it seems to determine which argument is valid or invalid. But if you memorize this song well, you can solve this problem. But how is this possible? This is the story for today. Sentences have a wider extension than propositions. A proposition is a sentence that is true or false. A sentence that is neither true nor false is not a proposition. For example, exclamations like, "How pretty this flower is," and questions like, "Have you been to New York?" are sentences, but not propositions. Sentences that are true or false, such as, "When it rains, the ground gets wet," or "Everyone dies," are called propositions. Among them, propositions in the form of subject and predicate, such as "everyone dies," are called categorical propositions. There are 4 types of categorical propositions. Universal affirmative propositions, like "all S is P," are called the A form. Universal negative propositions, like "no S is P," are called the E form. Particular affirmative propositions, like "some S is P," are called the I form. And particular negative propositions, like "some S is not P," are called the O form. Categorical syllogisms are arguments consisting of 3 categorical propositions. For example, arguments such as, "All logical people are philosophers," "All philosophers are rational," "Some rational people are logical," or "Some philosophers are not logical," "Some philosophers are rational," "Some rational people are not logical." The first 2 propositions are premises, and the last proposition is the conclusion. Syllogisms can be divided into different types. First, we must find the common term in the 2 premises. Here, the common term is philosopher. This is called the middle term. Depending on where the middle term is, syllogisms are divided into Figure 1, Figure 2, Figure 3, and Figure 4. Then, the first syllogism is Figure 4, and each of the propositions are in the form A, and form I. So this syllogism is Figure 4, AAI. The second syllogism is Figure 3. Each of the propositions are in the form O, form I, and form O. So this syllogism is Figure 3, OIO. In this way, there are 256 different types of syllogisms. Which of them are valid arguments? Aristotle says that only 24 of them are valid. They are these. First argument was Figure 4, AAI. It's here, so it is a valid argument. The second argument was Figure 3, OIO. It's not on the chart, so it is an invalid argument. Now we can solve the logic problems of Aristotle. The first argument is valid, and the second argument is invalid. So students who are learning logic had to memorize this chart all night long. AAA, EAE, AII, EIO. For almost 1,600 years after Aristotle came up with classical logic in the 4th century BC, students had to pull an all-nighter memorizing this. Then, in the 13th century, William of Sherwood, who was a British philosopher, became frustrated while memorizing this. AAA, EAE, AII, EIO. So, he tried to come up with an easier way to memorize the chart and made this. Barbara for AAA, Celarent for EAE, Dari for AII. This way, he created this song. In the 19th century, a philosopher named John Venn was also memorizing this song very hard. Then he wondered if there could be a way to solve the problems without memorizing this song. So he came up with the Venn diagram. Now let's talk about Venn diagrams. The set of all mammals includes elephants, bats, humans, dogs, and lions. The set of all flying animals includes eagles, bees, swans, humans, and bats. Let's say humans can also fly in a parachute. The set of all animals that can swim includes swans, penguins, flatfish, dogs, and humans. When you add them up, this is what happens. Bats and humans are flying mammals. Humans and swans are flying, swimming animals. Dogs and humans are mammals that can swim. Humans are mammals that can also fly and swim. This is called the Venn diagram. Now, using the Venn diagram, let's check the validity of syllogisms. Let's look at the first syllogism. Let's put this into circles. Rational, logical, and philosopher. The first proposition, all logical people are philosophers, means that no one is a philosopher and not logical at the same time. So you just erase this part. Then philosophers will be here, or both. But with the information we have so far, we don't know where. So we just draw a circle in the middle. It means there are philosophers here. The second proposition, all philosophers are rational, means that no philosopher is not rational. So you can erase this part. So the mark in the middle should be moved over here. And now philosophers may be here, or both. Because we don't know where they are yet, draw the circle in the middle here. Now let's look at the conclusion. Some rational people are logical. This means that there is at least one rational and logical person. Now that's the person here. The person here is rational and logical. So this argument is valid. Let's look at the second syllogism. The first proposition, some philosophers are not logical, means that there's at least one philosopher that's not logical. That's either here, or both. We don't know exactly where, so let's draw a circle in the middle. The second proposition, some philosophers are rational, means that there's at least one rational philosopher. It's either here, or both. We don't know exactly where, so let's draw a circle in the middle. Now let's look at the conclusion. Some rational people are not logical. This means that there's at least one person who is rational and not logical. So you just need to have something in here, or here. You don't know if there's a person here or not because there could be dots like this. So this argument is invalid. When you make an argument, you must provide grounds to support it. That's how you can persuade people. It's the same for philosophical arguments and for political arguments. However, when you listen to an argument, you can sometimes be confused whether the ground is true or not. It is not as easy as you think to determine whether an argument is valid or invalid. In addition, some people speak using a very difficult language to make their argument seem grounded. It seems to have been the same in ancient Greece 2,500 years ago. Politicians came to the square and misled people with all kinds of rhetoric, and people couldn't tell whether it was valid or not. So Aristotle got angry and thought that we should make a rule to distinguish whether something is nonsense. That's why Aristotle's logic came to be. If you think about it, this is very surprising. Aristotle didn't invent an object or suggest a theory. He just created a new field of study called logic. And that logic is still keeping us awake at night to this day. For 1,600 years from the 4th century BC to the 13th century, when William of Sherwood wrote the song, students were suffering, memorizing AAA, EAE, AII, EIO. And for 600 years from the 13th to the 19th century, when John Venn came up with the Venn diagram, students suffered memorizing the song. And now students are suffering learning how to draw Venn diagrams. And yet we should thank William of Sherwood and John Venn. Without them, we would still be memorizing AAA, EAE, AII, EIO all night long. Let's wrap up. First, when you make an argument, you must provide grounds to support it. Logic determines whether an argument is valid or invalid. Second, Aristotle developed logic to determine whether a syllogism is valid or not. Third, John Venn came up with the Venn diagram to determine whether a syllogism is valid.